Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, the number one place to hear real stories from people who are solving real problems in business and life. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And on this show, we just don't talk a theory. We actually talk to the people who are doing the work, navigating the risks, and helping others succeed. And today's conversation is especially valuable if you've ever wondered, how do people actually fund property or business deals when the path isn't always straightforward? I'm always walking in my area and there's always 3 or 4 buildings going on all at the same time. And I'm always wondering, how do these people get this money? How do they know when these deals are about to launch and things of that nature? And I'm hoping our guest today is going to be helping us getting into the nitty-gritty of such details, because the truth is most opportunities don't fail because they're bad. They fail because the funding puzzle hasn't been solved yet. And today's guest just lives right in the middle of that puzzle every single day. But before we begin, wherever you're watching or listening right now, be it YouTube, Spotify, your favorite podcast platform, make sure you subscribe right now so that you don't ever miss an episode, because we release conversations that are designed to change how you think about business, money, and opportunities. Now, Christiaan, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. And you, Prosper?
Absolutely excited for what we're about to jump into today. And for those that are watching, today I'm joined by Christiaan Jansen from At Threesixty Finance. And he is basically spent over 2 decades around property and finance, studying in the bank mortgage division and eventually building a career around creative funding and connecting people, opportunities, and capital. And he's also been a B&I member for nearly 14 years, which tells me one of 2 things. He either believes in relationships or he needs more friends. But I know he probably knows someone who knows something about something going on somewhere. And in fact, literally people call Christiaan and say, hey, Christiaan, you know anyone that can fix me up with this? So that's the power of being, in a network like this. But Christiaan, I've also got to ask, I read something about you that made me smile, right? You've actually cycled from Pretoria to Cape Town, not once, but twice, And you know what's funny about that? Most people actually struggle to cycle just to the end of their street. And here you are, you're crossing the country, on your bike. Is endurance something you've learned in cycling, or did business actually teach you, endurance first?
Well, it's a little bit of both. So, but how I was raised, my mother always emphasized go the extra mile. So I've always had the mindset of pushing a little bit further, pushing a little bit harder, and making sure that I put my best foot forward and I over deliver and under promise. So the cycling itself was an interesting adventure that just stemmed from helping one of my good friends find a new mountain bike. As he started embarking on this whole journey, he's also quite fond of adventures. We, with the celebratory M.E.D.I.A, started talking about some of the interesting things that people have accomplished. And the one that popped up was a guy that cycled from Joburg to Cape Town with the Sishen Saldanha line. And I suppose by the second beer, it must have lightened our resistance to it. We got to the point of saying, you know what, how about we do that? And that was October 2016. And then before I could wipe my eyes, I was in conversations with guys by the beginning of 2017 that had, during the December of 2016, cycled down to Cape Town for a fundraiser, and it just started getting its own legs. And ultimately, we ended up raising funds for a daycare center in Soshanguve. It's one of the townships on the outskirts of Pretoria. And we set off from the daycare center the one morning, and 15 days later, we arrived in Cape Town. So it was pretty interesting, but most of it was figured out as we went along. I mean, as much as you want to plan ahead, you can't really. There's always going to be variables. And so a lot of supplementary lessons. And I must say, the quiet time of spending 6 hours a day stuck in your own thoughts was one of the best things that I could have ever done, whether I liked it at that point or not.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, congratulations for, a lot of beer stories just end up there. And tomorrow everybody's nursing a hangover and nothing ever gets done. But you guys went ahead and did it. But you did mention, you were sitting in your thoughts for 6 hours at a time. But your job prior to that or during that, you were a quality control clerk in a bank mortgage division. I would suppose that's also spending 7 to 8 hours a day just in your thoughts and not talking to a lot of people.
Well, not really. So I've always been a bit of an ADD child, so I need some stimulation. And I think that's what ultimately attracted me to joining B&I, because even in an office setting there, I would run through the applications, take it one by one. We had our quota and our allotment per day that we had to complete. And if I saw myself getting way ahead of schedule, I would start roaming around the office building, chatting to other people. I never knew that that was networking. I learned that like a good 7 years later when I joined B&I. But it's important. Obviously, you will be stuck in your thoughts with a lot of it, but you can't really internalize so much of it. You have to look at what that specific transaction or problem case is and focus on that fully. So my mind tends to wander when I'm not focused on something. So I also create opportunities for myself to allow my mind to wander, to ensure that I remain creative.
I mean, obviously, this would have then made you start to realize that this is not where your story would end, right? If you would complete your work on time and spend the rest of the day now chatting, and I wouldn't know how other people were receptive to that because they might still have wanted to complete their work. And Christiaan is already out there networking, like you say.
Yeah, you read the room. So obviously, I didn't just go to one person and chat there. So I would meander about, and if somebody is up for a little bit of a chat, then I would go. But not disrupting other people's work is, quite frankly, I find that disrespectful.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I saw, in your application to come on the show is you were reading a book a week at one point. um some people don't even go past 3 pages of one book. It's just from one extreme, cycling across the country, to reading a book a week. Was there any particular genre or sort of ideas that you kept reading that wanted you to keep engaged with them?
Yeah, so the big thing for me at that point was to look at how to better myself. So I did a lot of reading around psychiatry. I did a lot of reading around personal development, businesses, business management. So, I mean, we all have that handful of books that form our whole perspective of how we do things. They evolve, but I mean, it's little catalysts of books here and there that will ultimately just drive you further. And I've always been super fond of reading. Started reading at a very young age, and my sister and I used to challenge one another about how many books we can run through during a particular month or holiday, where we would go to the library and then go and pick a few books. So it's always been there. I love reading, and I love broadening my knowledge base. But where I started off with a lot of fiction-related novels. It started becoming more apparent that it's important to keep abreast of what the rest of the world is doing. And the best way for you to learn, well, there's one of two ways. One is to make your own mistakes, and the other is to learn from others. So people that go through the effort of putting it into a book, I already deem that more than worthwhile to learn from them. I mean, that's own authentic history and stories that they can share that can help me.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what they say, readers are leaders. Now, I can only also imagine while you're working in these sort of environments, the managers or the people that you're working around, they're not doing anything to elevate themselves. Did this not find you logging heads with those that were around you or things of that nature?
I grew frustrated with some of them, and I suppose it's also a function of the industry, especially where I was there, that you become so transaction driven that you've got an absolute tunnel vision, and you're either a worker bee that operates that way or you're not. And I was not. So there was a little bit of conflict here and there, and I ultimately resigned out of the bank when it came to my knowledge that the positions that I was applying for to move up and outwards were being uh, basically hammered and hampered by my direct manager. So she was happy with the quality of work that I was delivering, and she didn't want to let me go. And that just made the whole thoughts around corporates so toxic for me. And thankfully, then I got headhunted out of the bank. So it made it a very logical move when the people that approached me were dynamic, excited about finances, about the property market, and so many things that have always piqued my interest.
You see, from there, obviously, you were let loose and eventually got headhunted into a property investment firm. What was the biggest mindset shift you had while you were moving into that world now?
Realizing possibilities, because you get tunnel vision when you're busy with the same thing over and over again. And I what one big change, especially for me, was the fact that I was now hearing people's own stories. I wasn't just looking at a file. So you can fill in the gaps. All of a sudden, you're not dealing with Prosper Taruvinga who's buying a house and it's that file that's just coming across my desk to make sure that everything is okay and that you'll get the financing. All of a sudden, I'm speaking to you. I'm hearing about your hopes, your aspirations, your dreams, and it just made everything so much more real. And that's ultimately prompted me to start building my own property portfolio, which I, for some stupid reason, never thought was possible.
Because obviously all you were doing, like you said, it was all transactional and you never really got to see, because representation matters. If you don't see other people around you doing stuff and maybe conversations around you validating that something is possible, you might not actually end up doing it. And if no one around you is backing you, you're not in the right place.
Yeah, but so many of those limits are self-imposed as well. I mean, if we look at how we tend to just hold ourselves back, there was an interesting book that was recommended to me that I read about 2 years ago that actually articulated it in a better way. It's a simple read called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. It's specifically about those self-imposed glass ceilings that we create. And if you don't have people around you that challenge that, then you're going to be stuck there. And we don't know what we don't know. And that's been something that's driven me for so long, to just push harder and find more things that I didn't know. And it's some of it's useful, some of it's not, but I will have learned in the process. And it just maintains the fact that we are on a journey.
But those checks and balances are there for a reason, and some of them, stop people starting a business in 2008 during the biggest financial crisis that was known to men during that time. So what was going on then?
Oh, I had just started a property investment club with a financial advisor and a property developer at that point. A little bit of hubris, I suppose, but we were full of energy and ready to get cracking on it. And then the whole market just completely collapsed. And it ultimately created amazing opportunities because we could leverage the developers network in securing more properties, especially on new developments that went stale. A lot of sales got cancelled with the implementation of the National Credit Act. And that in itself led to a lot of developers bleeding because they were unable to sell off stock. And if you look at the nature of your financing, if you get a development bond from a bank, you need to sell those properties. That's part of your agreement. You can't just quickly go and convert it into a rental stock bond where you retain the units and rent them out. So we were able to secure wonderful deals for the investors that we had built up at that point. And it just went from there. So it was quite an interesting revelation as well to see us prosper while a lot of people were taking an absolute beating. So it was an important lesson to me as well to, as much as you need to always be aware of what's happening around you, don't second guess when things are going well with you, because you clearly are doing something right if things are going well. If things aren't going well, it doesn't mean that everything you're doing is wrong, but there needs to be a bit of a shake-up and a redress.
And the fact that you guys stayed afloat while everybody else was obviously blood on the streets, do you owe it to your ability to connect situations, people, and opportunity, or had that not sort of started at that particular point?
It hadn't really featured on purpose. So some of it was happening just by sheer nature of my personality as well as my partners that I had. And that only really became more clear to me around about 2012 when I joined B&I, where I started realizing that, listen, I've always been connecting people. I've always been trying to pull opportunities and solutions together to one another. And I mean, we don't know what we don't know, as I said, and we don't always know what we're doing that's working. So it was an interesting time with that, and not all easy, obviously, but we were strong enough in our conviction to believe in what we were doing and know that we were making a difference. So we could keep on even when things got tough.
And I mean, obviously, so many people when they're getting into, getting started in business and, having come from like a salary sort of mindset, what was the transition like for you, in that sort of respect?
Well, the realization that you need to be very, very careful with what and where you spend your money. The leaky bucket is a horrible thing. And one of the biggest leaks or causes of leaks is time. And I mean, it's amazing when you look at so many examples with that. So we didn't really have a lot of startup capital or anything. So it was just a matter of survival mode. As the transactions came through and transferred, we got our commissions. So we had to just manage and maintain it accordingly. I then very quickly started reverse engineering it to say, well, if I'm going to earn X amount per transaction, I need to just convert that into how many transactions sustain my lifestyle, and then reverse engineer that once again into how many I then need to do per year, per month, per week. And that very easily then drives your daily activities. So you need to focus on income producing activities, especially when you're self-employed. Because quite frankly, there you've got the worst possible boss, and that's the guy that looks at you in the mirror. So they're relentless with giving leave or not. And your boss is just as lazy as you are. So you need to manage it.
Now, for somebody who's watching this right now, who doesn't fully maybe understand what a funding specialist does, could you maybe walk us through what that means and what sort of problems you solve that most people don't even realize that you work on.
So money will always be the enabler of things. And the access to money is typically where a lot of people fall short. So from my side, bare bones, we do mortgage broking. So in South Africa, it's called bond origination, where we will facilitate a financing application on behalf of an applicant to all of the different banks. So we know what the credit process entails, what to look out for, where the potential pitfalls are, and we address them upfront to make the path as smooth as possible. That also in itself then branched into other offerings. So I was approached to become a franchisee of At Threesixty Finance. May 2019, I joined with them. And at that point, I was able to offer additional funding solutions where we were able to look at business financing, bridging financing, purchase order financing, invoice discounting, a bit of everything. But the long and the short, and I always laugh because one of our biggest points of training from a B&I perspective is that you need to be specific. As the founder, Dr. Ivan Meisner, says, specific is terrific, but my funnel is so wide because it all starts with, I need money. So then we go and find the requisite solution for that. And I emphasize the fact that it's we, because I myself cannot do each and every one of those transactions perfectly. I've got sufficient knowledge of how everything works, but it is imperative to have the right specialist also working on the particular solution. If I just look at agricultural financing, that's an absolute minefield in terms of financing, actually in the global landscape at the moment. And having the right specialist in our office makes it a lot easier for us to help and solve that complex problem.
So who basically needs to sort of come and find you and start talking to you? You did mention agriculture or finance. Is that somebody who wants to buy a farm or somebody who wants to buy a property? What sort of people do you want to work with mainly?
So my absolute sweet spot and where I get the most enjoyment is property related. I've got a lot of property investors with whom I've walked a long journey where with every single purchase transaction, I help and facilitate. Notwithstanding the fact that I can also then assist them with the purchase planning to ensure that everything gets put together correctly so that they've got a sustainable financing model. So then you look at your structuring and a lot of nitty-gritty details in there. So I won't bore everybody with that because I know not everybody gets as excited about mathematics and numbers as I do. But my absolute ideal clients are individuals that are looking at the acquisition of property. So on the commercial space, there are many different types of property, but the foundation and the metrics remain the same. You need to establish repayment ability, and there needs to be sufficient security in the property. When there's opportunities to increase value, then obviously that also helps, but that forms part of the whole pitch of that transaction to a financier to ultimately then get them funded to set them on their way. Because it's amazing. If you compare a normal apartment to somebody buying a block of flats, to somebody building a massive office block, or somebody building an industrial property, the metrics are practically identical. Apart from the processing and the financing transactions will differ because there are other complexities. But the bottom line of it is, can you pay for it? And then more importantly, so can the asset pay for itself?
Absolutely. And I like what you mentioned that, we need to establish payment ability, and if the asset can back itself up in terms of the value of the piece that you're purchasing. What are maybe some misconceptions that people show up, at your office thinking, I think I've got it made, and then only to realize that they still have a little bit more work to do in order for them to secure that funding?
So there's one very, very unfortunate one with it, and that is that many a time I can be called a dream killer, because somebody comes with this conceptual idea of this is how I want to embark on my property journey, but the basics in terms of credit score and repayment ability are not there. So, especially in the formal financing field, there's a lot of emphasis placed on sustainability of earnings, and you have to have stability. If you've got a business, you need to show a track record of that business by means of financial statements. If you're employed, you need to show consistent salary deposits. You need to show a good credit score. And then when you get into the commercial transactions, you need to also show your balance sheet. So a lot of people come to me, and I actually had an example last week where a guy came to me when he initially reached out to me. That was probably about a year and a half ago. His credit was shot. He wasn't in a good space in terms of any form of financing. When he reached out to me last week, he was able to share the victory of having sorted out everything with regards to his credit profile, but he's currently not employed. He's got a lump sum of capital, and he came to me because he wanted to leverage that cash. In other words, in his specific instance, borrow 10 times that amount to then make more money and ultimately repay that. So on paper, it looks wonderful because, okay, well, cool. If somebody gives me $1 million and I can make 1.5 million off of that million, I can pay back the million plus interest and I've got a profit. So there's nothing wrong with the fundamentals in terms of the thinking. But the process from a financier's perspective is where he ultimately will always fall flat because he does not have any equity or security and surety that he can give to that cash. So if a lump sum of cash is given to him, what assurances does that financier have that they will get it back? So that's where a lot of the conceptualizing also comes in, to plan around it and to get yourself into a favorable position.
And so let's just say somebody's thinking, oh, I'm about to enter into some inheritance, and that's just that cash situation that just rocks up. And yet maybe behind the scenes, they had not been planning, like you're saying, to get themselves ready for some financial windfall, or in order for them to then enter into the market like that. Is there anything that you do to help them, maybe handhold them up until they're ready, or do you just want people that are fully baked and already can present to the bank that they are capable of financing whatever deal you're going to put them in?
I'm smiling because obviously I want the guys that are able, because that's where I'll earn my income. We are outcome based with any of the financing transactions, so it's in my best interest to get you funded. But I do spend a bit of time with guys wanting to get funded, getting themselves funding ready. So there is a bit of consultation that also is involved in that. But you actually touch on something which I feel is almost a message that I want to blast out to the world as often as possible, referring to inheritance and windfall. So there's an Afrikaans saying that says erfgeld is swerfgeld. So basically easy come, easy go with it. And you find it in so many instances with a windfall that that money just gets wasted. And it's a very, very important thing to note when you look at that inheritance and that windfall when it is bequeathed to you, because you're honoring somebody's legacy by what you are doing with that inheritance. So I've got a great example with a close friend of mine. When his mother passed away, there was a fair amount of cash due to him. And his first words were, I'm going to settle all of my business's debts. So I had a lot of vehicles on the road, and it was quite a high installment obligation that he was sitting with on a monthly basis. And he was taken aback when I became confrontative to him, where I said, but you're throwing good money that your mom worked her entire life for after assets that are depreciating in value. So quite frankly, I feel that you are not honoring your mother by this. And he got a little bit argumentative around it, but in the end also then understood my point, where my only question was, would your business have carried on whether your mom was alive or dead? And he said, yes. I said, okay, so you are able to cover those obligations. So carry on with life as is, invest that money, create a legacy for the future. There's no point in just blowing it all and being left in basically the same position, because 5-6 years down the line, you need to replace those vehicles. You're going to get cents on the dollar for what you paid for it. And what then? You're just going to be back into new debt.
Absolutely. So that actually then gets you to double up. I mean, from all the books that you've read and everything else, as a counselor as well, because some people would just have, like you said, received that windfall, and eventually they don't have somebody that can actually help them navigate that without the perspective of somebody who actually knows, how the system works.
Yeah, and we have to also be mindful of the fact that very few people are raised with good, proper financial literacy. So it is important to impart that knowledge as and when you can, and to help people to focus on what their bigger picture is. And I feel that that's probably one of the small elements to my business that almost automatically happens just on account of the fact that I'm passionate about it. And I really try to emphasize that as far as I go. Just always dumb it down, turn it on its head, see where certain holes are, poke more holes into your ideas, so that you are also not just better prepared for when things go wrong, because inevitably things will go wrong. That's part of life. But you are also way better prepared to stand your ground and have absolute conviction in the idea or business that you are busy with.
Absolutely. Because fish don't see the water that they swim in. If somebody just falls into some money, they're going to be thinking, what's the first thing that I can do, etc. So if there's people out there that are listening and obviously taking copious amounts of notes and trying to figure out what would be, the best way forward for them, how best can they, what methods can they use to get in touch with you?
So easiest would be by means of an email. So just pop me an email with an inquiry. I'm sure you'll add my email address in the show notes. And yeah, then we can take it from there and have a conversation and see where you are, where you're headed. And if I can't help, that's the absolute beauty of BNI. I'm sure I know a guy.
Absolutely. And obviously, I will make sure that all those links and your email are in the show notes, and then people can actually get in touch with you there. Now, Christiaan, when we started, you introduced us to this young guy who finishes his work early and just roams around the office talking to people. And, now, you're this guy who's making business deals that are literally building nations, so to speak, because if you're dealing the commercial side of things, these are the kind of things that are creating jobs and all the like. Now, if you could maybe go back to that young man whose career was capped, thought this was all there is, and then you could just whisper a few words to him right now, what would you tell him, Christiaan?
Don't doubt yourself so much. Because that doubt is the killer of all ambition. And I still find opportunities coming across my way where I have a bit of doubt creep in, but the awareness has helped a lot. One of my business partners in a property development we're busy with actually put it in wonderful terms in terms of how to discern as well. Because that is probably one of the biggest gifts that we as humans have, is the ability to discern. And we need to focus on that, and we need to lean in on that. And what he always says is to always, at all points in time, distinguish between an opportunity and a temptation. A temptation is an easy couple of bucks. An opportunity is something that just pulls you from the inside, where you really feel like, oh, listen, this makes sense. And the income has to as much as we're dependent on income, if it's a byproduct of you doing something that you're passionate about, that you love doing, that gets you out of bed in the morning, you'll never work a day in your life.
I like that. I like that. And thank you so much for validating that, because so many people just think whatever they're facing at the particular time, that's the cards that they've been dealt, and they would never venture to want more, be more, and have more. And now that you've shown us what is possible, what's next for you, Chris? And what can we celebrate in the near future that you're working on now that you brought us into your world?
Yeah, so I'm busy broadening my own influence around property developments. So we're actually about to finish off on a rental property on a golf estate that we're keeping for rental. That's a mini development of sorts, building quite a large house there, and a couple of other property development related ventures that we're busy with. And I'm also quite set on broadening my sphere of influence on an international basis. So at the moment, I'm traveling between South Africa and Germany, primarily based in Munich. My wife took on employment here, so I'm a bit more of an online operator right now. And with that, I'm busy opening up my networks in Germany, getting to know more people here. The language barrier is an interesting element to it, but we're working on it. And my big dream is to enable more business between Germany and South Africa, to get European funds into South Africa. I mean, just the leveraging effect of the currency exchange rate will create wonderful returns for European investors. I mean, what do you get in a bank here now? 2% per annum if you're lucky, versus larger yielding projects. I mean, some of the projects that we've helped fund deliver returns of between 20 and 45% per annum. So the scale is amazing, but the access to capital is ultimately where the big changes come in. So I'm very excited about bridging that gap between South Africa and Germany, and getting more people as passionate about South Africa as I am.
Oh, absolutely. And they've got a really good ambassador there. You see what I'm getting from your whole story here? I mean, your life story and your experience have so much value for somebody who was paying attention to this show right now, because you just didn't learn finance. You actually learned people. And in funding, people are the real variable. I mean, their beliefs, their trust, the timing, their ambition, all of that then culminates, because without that, you can't transact at the end of it. So would you say understanding people has been more important than just understanding numbers as they come?
Understanding people is especially necessary when you start leveling up. I mean, from a basic transaction perspective, it's paper-based. What computer says yes or no, and that will always remain the foundation of how any financier will look at an opportunity. As much as they'll buy into an individual, they need to know that the fundamentals are set and sound. So as you start broadening your horizons, as you start engaging with a larger variety of people, your people knowledge is absolutely crucial. You need to be comfortable with having a conversation. You need to be very strict on how you interact with them. So remain authentic to yourself. Don't be an absolute people pleaser trying to keep it calm. That has been something that I had to shake off. And the one saying that knocked me between the eyes with that was people who stand for everything who stand for nothing will fall for everything. And I've always been the one to try and just maintain peace and calm and quiet. So a stance of neutrality. And it's absolutely fatal from a business perspective, because if you are not absolutely convicted and strict on, listen, this is how it has to happen. If you don't stand your ground, nobody will take you serious enough to progress in your business relationships. So it will always remain superficial, small things. So it's that might be scary in many an instance, because we're also not wired to want to upset people around us. But there's a big difference between upsetting somebody, being rude, or being assertive. So be mindful of how you convey those messages, but be assertive and stand your ground.
Absolutely. Especially when you're telling someone you can't use the money that's in your bank account to fund whatever business mistakes that you have done. So I can only imagine. Now, Christiaan, I can't thank you enough for the time that you spent on the call today. I mean, your journey and everything else that you shared with us is really, really amazing. You've actually just taught us that resilient isn't loud, it's quiet. It's just showing up again and again, even after things have fallen apart. And I thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Prosper.
Absolutely. And for those that are watching right now, thank you for joining us on the Online Prosperity Show. And in our next episode, we're going to be talking about ideas and perspectives that can help you live a more happier and fulfilled existence. So make sure you watch that one. So if today's episode resonated with you, I encourage you to share this with somebody who might need encouragement or clarity right now. And wherever you are listening from, don't forget to subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on conversations like this. Now, I want to leave you with this one question. Now, in your life right now, who is one person in your life who believed in you when you actually doubted yourself? I want to encourage you to tag them or mention them in the comments below. Let's acknowledge the people who've actually helped us to keep going. Until next time, bye for now.